Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Peters for this confirmation hearing. Thank you, Mr. Wolf, for being here, for your testimony, for your willingness to serve, and for the conversation we had last week. And I'll join my colleagues in offering condolences to your entire workforce for the loss of the officers you have all suffered and to their families. Mr. Wolf, ISIS and affiliated forces are gaining strength worldwide, launching more than 100 attacks in Iraq last month, seizing more land in Afghanistan, and increasing threats on the African continent. This potential resurgence of ISIS in the Middle East, Africa, and Afghanistan is alarming, and we obviously can't ignore it. What steps has DHS taken to strengthen its counterterrorism capabilities in the event that ISIS continues to grow in these regions and pursues external operations against the U.S.?
So our counterterrorism portfolio and is sort of the core capability of what the department has done over its tenure. So we have a layered approach when we talk about counterterrorism policies and procedures that we put in place, from keeping individuals out of the country to identifying individuals as they come into the country, and then to make sure that we are removing individuals as we see fit. So we do that with a number of policies. We do that in close coordination with our foreign partners. We do that through travel restrictions that we have put in place over the years, but making sure our screening and vetting programs are really at the heart of our counterterrorism programs. And I would say that our screening and vetting programs at the department are probably some of the best in the world. And so we share that. We share those partnerships with our allies across the world, making sure they have programs like VWP, which is our visa waiver program, our ATSG, our SRTP. These are all biometric programs that we share with them so that we're able to share information, so that we're able to share that real-time, again, information so we know who is transiting certain countries, and making sure, so if we see individuals that are returning from the battlefield, perhaps back to the U.S. or back to Europe or other places of the world, that we're able to identify them and we're able to work together.
Well, thank you for that, and I would look forward to continuing to work on visa security teams as well, appropriately balanced. I've heard from many constituents regarding FEMA's recent policy statement that personal protective equipment and cleaning supplies purchased by schools are not eligible for reimbursement through the Public Assistance Program. While these items may not typically fall within the program, schools have been operating under the impression that they would be reimbursable during the pandemic and have acted accordingly. In New Hampshire, the communities of Salem and Londonderry must now find another way to pay for $350,000 in COVID-related expenses. There has been a bipartisan outcry urging FEMA to reconsider this position. These are obviously extraordinary times, and schools need this support to help ensure that students, teachers, and their families can be safe if they're able to return to the classroom. Will you commit to reversing this decision and allowing reimbursement for schools who purchase PPE and cleaning supplies?
So again, I have talked to the FEMA administrator about this, and this really has to do with authorities that FEMA has versus making sure they use that for emergency protective measures versus just sort of your traditional operating expenses. What I will say, though, is that there is funding outside of FEMA to address some of these concerns that schools have. We have over 39 different agencies that have over $3 trillion in funding from COVID-related packages.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second because I know how sparsely those resources have already been spread in my state, and there is nothing routine about needing personal protective equipment and sanitation equipment in schools to combat a pandemic. There is absolutely nothing routine about that. So I'd like you to...
HHS is distributing, again, about 125 million cloth face masks in the month of September as well. So
I appreciate that, but I will also just point out that FEMA led schools to believe they would be able to get reimbursed. They have therefore deployed the resources from other agencies in other ways. Let me move on to another question. For months, my staff and I have been trying to get updates from the Federal Emergency Management Agency regarding, oh, sorry, that was the question I just asked you. This happens. Let me move on to the last question I have for you. With less than 2 months until a presidential election, the nation is being bombarded with disinformation and propaganda coming from Russia. DHS's own intelligence and analysis shop has said this, and yesterday reports surfaced that President Putin and his top aides are probably directing the operation. Based on everything you've seen, do you think that the Russians are seeking to advance propaganda against Vice President Biden?
I think on everything that I've seen, that there are 3 nation states that we have to be very concerned about. One is Russia, one is China, and one is Iran, and they all have different ways and different motivations of doing this. We have seen what the intelligence community assessment has said, again, in early August, was that Russia looks to denigrate former Vice President Biden. China prefers Vice President Biden, and Iran prefers Vice President Biden. So we've got to,
But the answer is that Russia is in fact seeking to advance propaganda against Vice President Biden. Thank you for confirming that.
All 3 nation states are.
And because I do have a little bit more time, let me go back to one other issue. We've been trying to get updates from the Federal Emergency Management Agency regarding its role in the purchasing and distribution of personal protective equipment. I understand that many of the tasks handled by your department this spring have now transitioned back to HHS and the Department of Defense. But how precisely is the work being shared and what agency is handling it remains pretty opaque. So can you tell the committee in a straightforward way what FEMA's current role is in the pandemic response?
Sure. They still continue to coordinate a number of activities when we talk about making sure that PPE gets to certain places. Again, I talked about earlier about the lost wages program that FEMA continues to administer. And again, that's a COVID relief type of activity. So they continue to coordinate the vast majority of activities. I will say, as you indicated, certain activities have transitioned back to HHS as they are medical in nature as we continue to fight this. Happy to get you more information. Happy to have FEMA come up and brief you on exactly what they're doing. This isn't a secret. It's very clear and we've been very upfront about what their role is.
Well, and I appreciate that, but it has been very difficult, for instance, to get precise information about projections, for instance, on the amount of PPE needed. And what tends to happen is people say, well, HHS is dealing this or FEMA is dealing with that. And I think it's really imperative that we be able to exercise oversight and get precision from y'all.
I agree 100%. I have to say, as from March all the way probably to present day, FEMA has been overwhelmed with the number of letters that they have received, and they're processing them as quickly as possible. So we're being as responsive as humanly possible. As you can imagine, they got a deluge of letters from members of Congress.
Right, and the letters, and I know I'm over time, Mr. Chair, so I'll just close with this. The letters from Congress obviously should be responded to, but if you have a structure in place and clear communication, clear lines of responsibility, and constant communication with us, some of those letters might not be necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.